the most powerful way to manipulate you into something is not to tell you lies. It's actually when the AI uses more facts and figures and information, making you believe that this is very, very true because you're like, oh, it's saying all of these things that sound all very rational and they're all footnoted and sourced, and it looks like this must be a powerful argument. That is the best way to manipulate someone.
Welcome to Future TV. I'm Chris Brandt. My guest today is Anthony Vinci. He was the first chief technology officer at the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency, served on the team behind Project Maven, and worked at Bridgewater and Cerberus before this. He recently wrote The Fourth Intelligence Revolution, this book right here, which is awesome, and I encourage everybody to go out and read. It's a Financial Times Best Book of the Year on how AI and China are reshaping espionage. Today, he's the co-founder and CEO of Vico, an AI company that forecasts political, geopolitical, and economic events for finance, business, and government. Anthony, welcome to Future TV.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let's talk about your book. And I did mention I read this book. I thought it was really interesting. I loved, as I mentioned before to you, the fact that you put some great contexts for people in the front part of the book, and then we kind of dig into the meat of it and the sort of AI revolution side of it. But can you just talk to me a little bit about what was your idea in writing the book? What you wanted to convey, and ultimately, what is that fourth intelligence revolution?
Well, I really appreciate you reading the book, and that bottom line was the purpose of the book, was to write something for people who knew maybe a little bit about intelligence, but maybe nothing about intelligence, and wanted to know what was happening there. Because I feel like what happens with intelligence is we have these stereotypes. We see these movies like Jason Bourne or James Bond or something like this, and we think that's what intelligence is. And because it's technically kind of a classified world, it can feel like it's hard to get real information.
Yeah.
But look, the reality is you can actually say quite a bit about it, as I can attest, having written 90,000 words on intelligence agencies, and you can learn a lot about it. And if we don't know what's going on there, what can happen can be really bad. It can be really bad for society, for politics, for all of us, because intelligence agencies are really powerful and they do things that are right at the edge of our rights and our responsibilities as citizens. And if it goes bad, you end up with something like what Edward Snowden did and releasing documents, or the Church Commission, where the Senate investigated the CIA for years of misdeeds. And I don't want that to happen again.
Right.
And so I wanted to write a book and explain to people what was going on. And more importantly than that, where it was all going, because AI and what's happening with China is changing everything about intelligence. And so rather than me writing the book 10 years from now, looking back and saying, here's what went wrong, I was hoping to write the book and say, here's where we're going, just so you know, and here's why you should pay attention, because maybe working together we can help to ensure that the right decisions are made, because we all vote for the people who run these agencies at the end of the day.
In the early days when I was working in, like security, network security and things like that, and trying to explain to people why they should care, they're like, well, I don't have anything, nothing I do is interesting to anybody. Like, why would I be concerned about any of this? Why do I have to worry about my computer? Why do I, and I think you make a good case for why that you should be worried about these things. Can you talk about, espionage, you say, is in our workspaces and living rooms, right? Can you speak to why people should care about this stuff? Beyond the responsible citizen piece of it, but why personal?
For most of American history, intelligence has been something that's done, by spies to other spies in other countries. It happened to generals and politicians and people in Washington and Moscow, and it felt really far away.
Yeah.
Right. The OSS in World War II were spying on the Nazis. The CIA during the Cold War spying on the KGB. occasionally we might hear a story or two about a mole or something, but generally it was something that felt far away.
Yeah.
Now what's changing is that foreign adversaries have realized that the weak underbelly of American power is the American public, and that they can spy on American citizens, right? And more than just spy on them, they can try to influence them. And so this is what happened in 2016. The Russians wanted to essentially hack an election. They wanted to use advertising on social networks and things like that to get people to have different views on politics. I don't even believe that they were choosing one candidate over another. I think that they just wanted everybody to be angry and feel frustrated and create disruption in this election and cast doubt on the government, whoever won, right?
And cast doubt on truth in general.
And truth in general, exactly. Yeah. At the same time, because we're all now on the internet, because we're all on mobile phones, because now we're all starting to use AI, the Chinese in particular, their intelligence service, the MSS, has realized, hey, wait, we can spy on what all of these people are doing. And what they're doing is actually important for us because we're competing with America, not just militarily, we're competing with them economically and socially and ideologically. So now what's happening is we're seeing countries spying on people, collecting all of that data, and then trying to use it against the best interests of the American people, whether it's through hacking an election or controlling a social media app like TikTok. And so that's what I mean by it. And that is really different from the history of intelligence, right? Intelligence agencies maybe used to do things like propaganda, but it was small and it was generally around a war and it didn't really affect people's lives. Now it affects a lot of our lives. And I wanted the American people to kind of see that this was happening and also suggest things that we could do to protect ourselves.
Yeah. And I think, you spent a lot of time in your book talking about TikTok, but you go back to 2016. I think the real center of that storm was Facebook. And I think if an intelligence community wanted to build a tool, to manipulate people, you couldn't have built a better one than Facebook was at the time, right? And also Facebook, because it's a commercial endeavor, was also willing to just outright sell that data, right? Because there's a lot, there's advertising, there's, disinformation campaigns, there's, spying. There's all these things that kind of rely on the same types of information, right? And they were really built for that.
And it gives you a scale that wasn't possible. So maybe 50 years ago, you're a foreign intelligence officer and you could take out an advertisement in a newspaper and maybe it gets to some people who read that newspaper. But now with Facebook, you can take it out and millions of people will see it. And it's very targeted. So you can take it out and target a specific ad at a specific type of person, right?
Yeah.
But we have actually created an even more powerful tool for them to use, which is AI.
Yeah.
Right. So Facebook was, and by the way, the Russians used all the social media platforms. It wasn't just Facebook.
Yeah.
They were on Google Plus and these other ones, but Facebook is the one we know the most about, and
it was the biggest.
Like might have been the biggest.
Still is so big.
Yeah. They're the biggest player, and they're parasitic, right? They wanted to ride on top of this technology that existed. Why build it yourself?
Sure.
The Chinese built their own. TikTok is like their own that they built. It's a different approach, but now with AI, there is a better tool because now AI, unlike Facebook, yes, you can target to a type of person. With AI, I can target to you as an individual.
Yeah.
And I can speak to the question you're asking, and I can give you a follow-up answer. So now these intelligence agencies are actually targeting that as well. And there's something called LLM grooming, which is when you feed massive amounts of information to the LLMs to poison what's in them. And then that information then kind of retrains the model in a sense. The model thinks that this is real. And then when you ask it a question, it's going to feed you now that propaganda. And so the Russians have set up something called the Pravda network where they've publish hundreds of thousands of stories every day, not for you or I to read, but for the LLMs to read. And then we ask the LLM a question, and now we're poisoned that way, and it goes directly to me. So, this game of cat and mouse continues and gets more and more dangerous.
Disinformation in particular is a really challenging thing. And especially when you look at how it rolled out like back in 2016 on Facebook, or, like on TikTok or X, or, Twitter back in the day. It's I think people misunderstand what the intention of disinformation is and how it actually works. It's not necessarily misinformation. It could be accurate information in a context that causes, some sort of emotional reaction, or people to make decisions based on, being angry about things, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's that old saying, right? Like the best lie is one that has some, seed of truth in it.
Yeah.
And so it's the same with disinformation. Actually, the best disinformation or misinformation is actually true information that you have just now kind of maybe either modified or accentuated, or you've subtracted the opposing side, right? Because then if somebody does look it up, actually, it turns out it is a fact. So somebody says, oh, it is true that this person from this other country did this bad thing. But then if you lose all of the context that was one out of 1,000 people,
right.
Then all of a sudden you realize that actually it's a fallacy, right? It's just not true. That is it, and it makes it more dangerous. But here's also the funny thing about disinformation in America in particular, is that even when we know for a fact it's false, and even when we know for a fact it came from a foreign intelligence agency, that the Russian GRU, made this piece of information and they put it on Facebook, you and I still have a right to read it and to access it once it's here.
Yeah.
And that makes it really hard to combat, because the government cannot come censor it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if it was Churchill who said it or whatever, but it was, a lie can go around the world before the truth even puts its boots on. And people, I think, are really attracted to lies because it's interesting, or just they like the conflict. Because I mean, a lot of the strategy is just like, you're going to let him say that to you, on there too, just to spark that argument, right? I mean, the argument is the point.
The social media has that kind of like accentuation and echo chamber effect on information, and it gets people riled up in this way that's almost like addicting, like you want to see it more and more. And that, again, our adversaries know this, right? This is why they're using it. Now, AI, on the other hand, doesn't really have that, but what it has is subtlety on its side. The lie in AI can be very subtle. You might not even spot it. And there have been studies where actually the most powerful, call it propaganda or disinformation on AI, the most powerful way to manipulate you into something is not to tell you lies. It's actually when the AI uses more facts and figures and information, making you believe that this is very, very true, because you're like, oh, it's saying all of these things that sound all very rational, and they're all footnoted and sourced, and it looks like this must be a powerful argument. That is the best way to manipulate someone. And then leaving out the other side of the argument and those sorts of things.
Even though we know the provenance of this information, that people still, propagate it. I mean, and that is not limited to just, people in the country, random citizens. I mean, you see that happening among politicians, quoting, like everything from, Onion articles to, GRU propaganda. I mean, I think, and you talk about how the human is sort of the weakest link in all of intelligence. And, like, I don't know that our brains are capable of, because even somebody like myself who is familiar with disinformation campaigns and how these things work, and I've, seen them for years and years and years, but I still feel myself, I'm like, damn it, that really pisses me off. And I'm like, I catch myself, I'm like, whoa, where'd that come from?
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's very hard to filter through this. I mean, so What's the hope for us?
We've been lying to each other forever,
Yeah.
right? Even chimpanzees will kind of lie to each other.
Yeah.
So there is something sort of innate in any smart animal, as it were,
Any
right?
smart primate.
And there was propaganda. If you go to Pompeii, there's like graffiti propaganda written on the sides of buildings from 2,000 years ago,
Yeah.
right? So this has been around forever, and people, I think, are adapted to both kind of fall into this trap. It's kind of like, I think about it like fast food. Your body just wants sugar and fat, and so
It is exactly like
your
that.
mind kind of wants like exciting stories and things like that.
We're intellectually obese and diabetic at this point.
There we go. But also we are actually like pretty good at spotting lies. And like think about, if you have kids, like kids who are untrained liars, right? Like they're actually like terrible at it. You have to actually learn to lie, and you can spot it so quickly. They have all these tells, they smile or laugh or look right at the thing they don't want you to see, right? And we have to learn to lie because we're like actually pretty good at spotting it. Well, there are also classes of people in our society that are sort of trained to detect disinformation. Journalists do it, right? And intelligence officers do it. And look, nothing's foolproof, but I do think it is a learned skill that you can become good at. And actually in the book, what I recommend, which I think is a little bit of a controversial proposal, but I sort of say we should teach everyone to think like an intelligence officer, to in essence become a citizen spy. And that is the way to combat disinformation. Because we don't want the government to censor. Remember, like that, that's not going to work. No. Just giving another $10 billion to the CIA and the NSA and saying, go take care of disinformation, not going to work. It's just never going to work. Nobody wants this. So even the CIA doesn't want it. Trust me. Like nobody over there wants to be censoring what Americans read.
Right.
And so I think what we need to do is train everybody and say, look, we all exist in this world now. There's AI. Everything can be faked. Voice, audio, video, everything can be faked. And there are bad guys on the other side. Like, let's just face it. There are people in China and Russia and North Korea and Iran and so forth who don't have your best interests at heart, and they're going to use this AI and they're going to try to trick you and do bad things. They're going to try to get you
and
to
even
vote
domestically too,
and even domestically, or companies, by the way, are going to do the same thing, right? Yeah. Like, and so they just want to sell more cars, but like, and so we're all going to have to learn how to see through this and deal with this ourselves and become resilient. And there are some basic things that you can learn, right? Yeah. One thing is just recognizing that on the other side of that AI, there could be bad information, that there could be a bad person, that the AI can also be hacked. Two is doing those things that intelligence officers do in that situation, which is triangulate information. Don't believe a single source. Even if you have a good source, test it occasionally. And even using the tools of intelligence officers. You can use commercial imagery. You don't believe that the invasion is happening? You can actually look at a satellite image now, buy it off the web, and do your own research. So becoming actively involved in this. And that's what it is to, think like an intelligence officer. And it can sound extreme, but remember this, you were in the world of network security. If I was telling you, if I was telling somebody in the audience 35 years ago that we are going to train every man, woman, and child in America on how to deal with cybersecurity, people would have looked at me like I was insane and be like, what is cybersecurity? And like, why should I care?
Yeah.
But we did, in fact. And like 8-year-olds now know that they should change their password, because just like they don't want to get their bike stolen by leaving it on the street, they don't want to, have their email hacked. And they know this from a very young age because parents have the password on their iPad, and that's how they keep the 8-year-old out of it, right? And like They understand cybersecurity, and we've trained essentially everybody in the world. I think we can do the same thing for disinformation and AI-derived disinformation.
I think in school everybody called it critical thinking, to some extent, which is largely what it is. But I just like Americans want something that comes in a pill, or like is really easy to do, a button to push or a pill to take. Like I think learning critical thinking skills and learning to think like a spy, might be too heavy a lift for the bulk of the population. And and ultimately it's always about the numbers at the end of the day, of people that you can get over there. I just worry that, like, evolutionarily, we are not suited for the world that we're stepping into, and there's going to be a big disconnect there.
It is critical thinking. In the book, I actually sort of draw this parallel between philosophers and spies, right? Like, because they're both really cynical types of people who don't believe anything that they're told, right?
Yeah.
But I think the difference is, it's also recognizing that there's an adversary.
Yeah.
So it's not just critical thinking because there might be an error or because the world's hard to understand. It's critical thinking because there might actually be somebody
doing it to you,
trying to con you, right? And look, we still teach it. We still teach people how to do this. I do think teachers should learn. I think you do it in an age appropriate way, and third graders can be told, like, hey, you're doing this report. What if there was a bad person on the other side? Like, how would that change your mind? Right. Maybe one day maybe the next book I write is a children's story. I don't know. But I do have a little bit of optimism that we can do it. And especially because we've done it before, right? We've done it with cybersecurity. We actually did it with terrorism, right? Post 9/11. I mean, you still, when you're in New York and you're on the subway, there's still the signs that say, see something, say something, right? And we did sort of, as a nation, realize, look, there's this big threat and we should do something about it. And if there's like some funky looking bag with a ticking sound coming from it, most people will still like tell a cop and realize, like, we have to protect ourselves. We also do it with crime, by the way.
Yeah.
We teach children from a very young age, like, how crime works, stranger that there are danger. Criminals, stranger danger, right? And so this is just another one of those things. And by the way, we don't have to get it perfect, right? We don't get cybersecurity perfect. Do phishing emails slip through? Yes. But even if you just get the 80% solution, you create resiliency, you make it that much harder for the adversary to take advantage of you.
We are entering a very interesting new world. And, like, I was at RSA earlier this year, and I was quite taken by the fact that basically, everybody's, business had been completely upended by AI, and the insertion of AI into security has really, really drastically changed things. Like I saw everything from, deep fake detection tools to, like agent interaction, a lot of around identity access management, API management, things like that, to, sort of identify threats against agents. But now, now you're seeing like these multimodal attacks where, they're launching 0 days that have been, detected and weaponized. At the same time, you got an agent doing some sort of social engineering on a human. You got an agent doing social engineering on another agent. I mean, it's a drastically different world we live in. And at that same time, we have so much data now we're collecting and retaining. It's, like, how do you make sense of it all? And how do you get ahead of that, like, adversarial threat when there's such an imbalance right now?
I write about this in the book, and I think about it in terms of intelligence, right? I have an AI spy that I want to use to spy on your government. Well, you also have AI. And so you're using your AI spy to spy on my government. And so I use my AI spy to stop yours. I do AI counterintelligence, and so on and so on. So if you ever read that old comic, Spy versus Spy, they're always trying to one up each other, right? Well, now it's AI spy versus AI spy, and trying to attack and defend. And I think that the same thing is happening in cybersecurity. Like, yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, what we saw with Mythos, for example, the Anthropic model, where it's able to spot these 0 days. It's not that we couldn't spot 0 days before. It's just that it took a lot of time, and you had to have like a really good expert to be able to do it. So there weren't that many that could be discovered. Now you've got like AI is great at scaling, and it's like pretty smart. So it can just you can run at any scale and spot way more 0 days. But also at the same time, it's really good at spotting weaknesses in code.
Yeah.
Right. And that's actually why it's good. Like, I don't think in any way they tried to design an AI that was good at hacking. They tried to design an AI that was good at coding.
Yeah.
And when you're good at coding, you spot broken code, and then it could spot that. But that also means you can fix it.
Yeah.
And so I think what's going to happen is for every downside, there's an upside and vice versa. So yes, you can have more 0 days, but I can also very quickly run through my whole network, run through my whole computer system and look for these weaknesses and then patch them very, very quickly. Whereas I used to have to put a person on it. Now I can, develop, a few new lines of code immediately, maybe in an automated way. I don't even have to have a person look at all. It just kind of cranks through it. Same thing is going to happen, I think, with information operations, right? And where in disinformation, AI, it's already being used to develop disinformation, send that disinformation out to all sorts of different people. But we could also use the AI to help us spot disinformation.
Right.
AI is great at spotting patterns, including that other AIs made it up. Right?
Yeah, and surfacing the provenance of information. Yeah.
Anybody who's written a book recently will probably get the same warning I got from my book agent, which is don't use AI because they use the publishers use an AI to spot and see if you used AI to write your book, because people may know this, you can't copyright something that an AI makes. So if you write a book and AI wrote it, you can't copyright it. Publishers don't want that, right?
Yeah.
So for every bad piece of disinformation, maybe we can use AI to help find the disinformation. So I think actually what's going to happen is that the game is just going to continue. And now we're just going to play the game at a higher level with AI going after the AI and so on.
Yeah. And I think, when Mythos came out, and that was a big, there's a lot of drama around that. And most recently, the consumer version of that Fable 5 came out and was instantly pulled from the market. I think I had it for one day.
Yeah.
But I think, it is good at detecting errors in software. But I think the thing that was really, that they called sort of the step function of Mythos was really that not only could it detect, bugs and problems and vulnerabilities, but then it could turn around and automatically weaponize those into an attack framework, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of the big difference, and could kind of run off and do it on its own. And when you look at there's a threat counter out there somewhere that like kind of tracks the timeline between a CVE, which is a vulnerability document that comes out that talks about a vulnerability for people who are not familiar with that, and the time from a CVE being published to the exploit is now 10 hours, which is crazy to think about. I mean, like, when the majority of like attacks are coming from, unpatched software vulnerabilities anyways, you don't even have 10 hours to deal with something. That's like making a patch, distributing the patch, installing the patch. That's going to be really crazy world we're living in.
This is why I thought that the solution was fairly savvy, which is let's release this early to the people who want to patch things, who we trust. So let's say you're Microsoft, you're concerned with Windows. Okay, you release this AI. Let me run it myself. Let me self-hack, and then patch everything. And remember, it's finite, right? So in theory, Mythos, once you run it once, or maybe you run it a few times, and it looks for those, and then you've patched all those, eventually it's not going to find anymore. The model will sort of, in theory, should hit its like that's all the, at that level of sophistication, those are all the weaknesses it can possibly find.
Yeah.
And so I do think we're sort of entering a world now where you can no longer just release a model into Gen Pop, right? And just let people do whatever they want, because there will be these dangers,
Yeah.
right? I do think this idea that maybe we release it to the government early, let the government, first of all, find the weaknesses in classified systems and things like this that nobody wants. Nobody wants, Sandia National Labs with its nuclear secrets to be hacked.
No.
That's like net bad for all of us. So let's let them sort this out. Then from there, okay, now let's worry about utility companies and things like this. And then maybe, networking companies and IT companies and software companies. And so if we can do that at every time, that seems rational to me, right? Again, this used to exist. It was just people, right? There was somebody who worked at the NSA, right? And this person was trained over a lifetime to hack into things. That person retires. He goes out and works in private industry. In theory, he could go out and start hacking into American companies and banks and steal all the money that he wanted, right?
Yeah.
Like that's always been an issue. Now, that didn't happen because one, we had laws that person probably didn't want to break. And two, he's a human being and has morality and things like this.
Yeah.
Right. And is probably not going to go do that, even if he could, in theory, go do it. Right. It seems like we need kind of the same thing with AI.
Yeah.
Like one, we need laws and processes to ensure that it doesn't do it. And two, we probably need something built into the AI so that it doesn't just go out and start harming people.
Yeah.
And I think kind of both things are sort of happening, right?
Yeah.
Where the model companies are sort of trying to figure out how to do both of those things. And the government is trying to figure out, like, how do we not crush these companies with regulation, but how do we figure out some way to, like, ensure they're not making bioweapons or hacking nuclear labs?
Yeah. And it's moving absolutely at the speed of light right now too, which makes it even harder. Companies do this as well. It's not just nation state actors and things like that, but I mean, the idea that, I mean, look, I mean, some of these companies have resources bigger than, many of our adversaries out there. Like Elon Musk personally has more resources than some of our adversaries, and he has rockets at his disposal, which, I mean, are like at the end of the day, intercontinental ballistic rockets, for whatever purpose you want to make them for. I mean, so, like not only, these tools, I think, enable, more potential espionage between, competing states, but, like espionage in our day-to-day lives, like between companies, between, very well-entrenched wealthy people, between, I mean, there's just the attack surface has gotten bigger, I feel now. I mean, would you say that's accurate?
I think that's accurate. I mean, look, companies have been big for a long time, right? And people worried, like in World War One, about the military-industrial complex, and that,
Yeah.
And there were mercenaries, mercenary companies, in essence, in Renaissance Italy, running around like
Right.
taking over, governments, and so we have been addressing it, but it is interesting, what you're saying, in that today it's like these single individuals can rack up so much power, and there are many of them. But again, I would come back to this is why we have laws and morality, right? Look, societies have realized this for a long time, that there could be people so powerful that they could actually harm large portions of society and maybe even the government itself. And so there is law and there's law enforcement. And like, yeah, Elon Musk has rockets, but at the end of the day, one cop can stop that from right? Like if he's going to launch something and a judge says no, you cannot do that. Trust me, a police officer walks in there, gun drawn, and says, "You at the control, turn that thing off." They're going to turn it off. And this is, it's. I hate to, I hate to think about it in such like crass terms, but at the end of the day, that's what sovereignty is about. And it's about this monopolization of violence, right? That a government really can come in and say, no, you just cannot do this. We've gone through the courts, and that's it. But even more than that, there's a morality in it, which actually in today's world means, I think, more than it ever has in the past. I do think these guys have a moral duty to think about what they're making and how it should be used and could be used, because there are, where it gets really hard is maybe you're doing something where there's not a law against it.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Like but you could still stop it. And social media, I think, harmed people for years and still continues to.
Big time.
And it wasn't illegal, but I do think some of these CEOs could have lessened that harm by making some choices. And I think the same thing is happening in AI. What's interesting in the AI industry is a lot of the founders seem to be cognizant of this.
Yeah.
And are trying to kind of minimize the harm where they can. I would hope so.
Some are. I would
some
say.
are. Some aren't. Let's say.
Yeah.
I know. Like I run an AI company today. I think about this. I mean, obviously, I don't run
very
Anthropic or something, but like I do actually think about it, and I know that the developers who work for me think about it, and so I do think there's this morality level to this, and we all should take it seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I do get concerned that a lot of developers I see in like the Valley have declared P 100% on the doom chart, and they're starting to bug out. But I mean, like you look at like that one interview like Peter Thiel did, where it was, the question was something about like, should humanity continue to exist, and it took him a really long time to answer that question. And I don't think we got a satisfactory answer out of him either. And, he's one of the architects of this, so like I think it is, like, I think we have to, I mean, I guess, the web of threats that we have to be aware of, it's like, it's external, but, it's the call is coming from inside the house a bit too. On some of this stuff. And I'm not, meaning to spark, AI panic, because I think AI is going to be an incredibly useful and valuable tool. And I think it has the potential to be one of the most impactful things to humanity, in our history. But there are, like you say, there's concerns.
I think that the concerns, the people harming people part will come long before the AI harming AI people part will come, right? Yeah. Like people will use AI to do all sorts of horrible things to other people long before AI is like sentient and evil enough to start harming us. So I feel like we should figure that part out first.
Yeah.
And whether that's, look, social media, the threat was surveillance. I think AI, the threat is thought control, which to me is in some ways even scarier than the threat of surveillance, or even like the people talk about the like killer robots. Yeah. Like, okay, but at least they're killer robots and you can fight back. With thought control, when it's good, you don't even fight back.
Yeah.
Right? That's what a totalitarian states try to do. And now we're under threat from that, even at home. So we should care about it a lot. So
yeah, and it's not even just from the state, though. That's the interesting thing now.
And yes, exactly. And so there are these things we should worry about today. And then, yes, like, look, AI can seem big and scary, but, remember this. We are one president away from the American people being like, yeah, we're electing the guy who wants to nationalize AI companies.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and then that happens. And it's like, that's it. right? And so there is a self-control built, like that's why democracy is so interesting, is like every 4 years you get to sort of decide, and you're like, yeah, we think this is dangerous, and so you need to go in there and stop it, and then they stop it, in theory. Or it's also somebody walking up, look, okay, AI is embodied in a data center, and you're some wire clippers away from solving that problem if you wanted to, right? Like there are ways that society can control these things. So I don't think we should be freaking out quite yet. We should more be freaking out about what are people doing with this, and are there people in power, domestically or in adversarial nations, that are trying to harm us today.
Yeah, I wonder how long it'll be until we elect our first AI president, and just say thank you. I for one welcome our robot overlords and just go about our day.
I mean, it's interesting, right? Like, I doubt that I doubt that Thomas Jefferson had this in mind when he was writing it. But at the end of the day, you have to have been born in America, and be over the age of 35, and AI does not meet either of those. So
I was born in America, and soon it will be over the age of 35.
Born. It's a powerful verb.
It is. It's doing a lot of heavy lifting in that statement, for sure. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about, like one, the challenge of sort of these getting comfortable with non-deterministic systems in our world, right? And non-deterministic systems sort of running our lives and running our security and protecting us from a lot of these threats. And one of the things I thought was a great comment you made in the book, you said, rather than being in the loop, we have to be on the loop. Could you explain, the difference there?
Yeah, actually what I say is people want to be in the loop.
Yeah.
We, by default, will likely be on the loop, but that actually we will end up in the place where we're not touching the loop.
Right. And I think that's a great turn of phrase. So
Yeah. I mean, in the loop, the idea is that it's easiest to understand that there's this debate in the military about killer robots, right? And you maybe you have a drone that can shoot a missile, it can kill a person. And the question is, do you let the drone just shoot the missile? And in the loop means that at some point, a person has to actively hit the button to shoot the missile to kill a person, right? On the loop means that the person is there, that they are able to monitor this, and they can push the button or they cannot push the button, but they don't have to do either. The robot will go and can push the button itself, but a person needs to be at least around it.
Right.
Then there's the idea of it just does it, and it's just automated. And unfortunately, I do believe that we will very rapidly hit a point where we say, yeah, we just got to let the systems go.
Yeah.
Because remember, the bad guy on the other side also has the drone, and they're might say to themselves, well, let's just, I don't care about collateral damage, and just start shooting and let this thing go. And now that drone is operating far faster than a person can, and there's nothing you can do. And the proof of this is if you look in finance and you look at hedge funds, where these hedge funds now make the quantitative hedge funds, they're called, make these essentially autonomous bots that trade. But these bots are now trading so fast that a human cannot process it. And they let them go, not because they want to kill anybody, but because they want to create more profit, right? And if I tried to have a person stay on the loop, then I would be operating more slowly, and the other guy's going to make all the profit. So eventually I say, well, for me to make the most profit, I'm just going to let the robot go, and it's going to do all of the trading. And maybe I just might have like a circuit breaker if it starts going like completely crazy and losing lots of money, but that's it.
Yeah.
And so I do think that there is this like competitive pressure to operate faster and faster. The same thing's going to happen in warfare. The same thing's going to happen in all sorts of other parts of society with AI, unfortunately. And so I think where you need to operate then at that level is the design function. How have we designed it? How does it think? Are we sure we trust it before it even gets out there into the field and starts to operate?
Yeah. I want to switch it up and talk about Vico, because I tried out Vico. It's very interesting. Tell me, like, speaking about AI and all that, tell me what Vico does, because this is a really interesting tool for making better decisions. And
Yeah, we made a system that can forecast the future, and it can forecast it better than people and prediction markets like Polymarket or Kalshi or something like that. And
yeah,
basically, what we did is we built a system. It takes in tons of information from the internet. Think about something that's reading all the news in every newspaper in the whole world every day, every minute, right? And then we built an AI system. It's actually sort of a pretty sophisticated system. It's not just an LLM, because as you sort of mentioned before, LLMs are a little too non-deterministic to be
right.
pretty, particularly good at this. There's a lot of mathematics and data science and actually modeling and simulation that goes into this. But we built a system that is very good at thinking like a person would think to forecast the future, taking into account historical patterns, taking into account causation, and all of these factors, how you would actually predict what will happen. And then we unleashed it and we let it forecast things, and it learns over time to get better and better at this. And we back test it so we know how well it performs. And it's actually doing pretty well. So, I mean, we forecasted the strikes on Iran. We forecasted the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. We forecasted that the Virginia Supreme Court would overturn redistricting. We forecasted inflation in April and May this year. And we did it with high confidence and in non-consensus. Like, these were hard forecasts to make.
Right.
Like, people did not think the Strait of Hormuz was going to close. That's why oil doubled in price. They really did.
And I was telling you this earlier, as a political science major, I find that so bizarre that like that. But I mean, I think that speaks to like the volume of information that everybody gets. Sometimes it's like, more information isn't necessarily better. Right?
It can be hard to weigh it, to analyze it, to do it, and to do it every time and do it without bias. And I think that in many ways is the secret of our system, is that we as people fall into these biases, either are the way we think as an individual, or because they're, if you read the news, it's all argument and politicization and all of these things. And the system doesn't care. It's just looking for truth. It's like a perfect philosopher in that sense. And it's able to outperform people. And then you can use it to make decisions, to make better. That's what I care about. Like forecasting the future is cool, right? But what I actually care about, what I did as an intelligence officer, just try to help people make better decisions. And that decision might be how to trade a stock. That decision might be how to ensure a war doesn't start. That decision might be a personal decision, like, should I buy a house today or should I wait 6 months, right? And we're trying to do that. And that involves providing forecasts, yes, but also scenarios. When you make a decision, you want to run a scenario, not just like, what will happen in this election or what will happen in the Strait of Hormuz and whether I should buy oil or not. But what if this happens? What if that happens? That's how we actually make decisions. And so we provide a series of tools to help people think through decisions. And we service people in finance, like hedge funds. We service, I still think about the mission. So we try to help, the Department of War and the intelligence community. And ultimately, anybody can sign up and use it to make their own decisions.
Maybe President Vico is going to be the first one.
Well, I do really think that presidents are going to use AI to help them make decisions. I do.
Oh, I hope they do. And I hope they do.
I think it will make the world a safer place. Like,
I agree.
What a lot of people miss about intelligence, just to bring it right back around, is that what intelligence officers do is try to keep us out of wars.
Right.
The military is there to fight and win a war. The intelligence officer is there to help you never get into the war, because you see what's happening coming, you understand what's happening, and you buy space and time for a decision maker to try to avert that war. Well, I think the same thing, happens with something like Vico, right? Like, my goal is like, this thing helps us not get into a war, or this thing helps you make that better decision so you don't lose money on your house or choose a bad college for yourself or something like that, right? Like, that's like my real goal.
I had a professor who always says that, war is sort of the outcome of bad politics, right? And, like understanding in a historical context, the changes that are going to be created by any political decision that gets made. And at the end of the day, wars have to be diplomatically resolved anyways. So like, if we could get to the point where you could say, in 70 years, if you overthrow this government in 70 years, we're going to have this huge crisis here. Like that's the level I would love to get to. And I think this is a good start you got going here with Vico. So I'm excited to see it grow and be used in decision making.
Thanks. Appreciate that. That is the goal. And I think what we go to work every day trying to do. And so, and by the way, if anybody wants to try it out, it's at vico.io, vico.io. And you just mention you heard the podcast and you can try it out.
If people wanted to get in touch with you and you've got quite a past too. How would they reach out to you?
Yeah, can check me out at anthonyvinci.com. Is my website where you can reach out to me, or check me out at vico.io and hit me up there, or just hit me up on LinkedIn or X or something like that.
Well, Anthony, really appreciate you being on. I got about 3 more hours with questions I would love to ask you, so maybe we have to do a part 2 at some point. But thanks so much for being on. I'm excited to play more with Vico. I've been sort of gaming some things out myself on there, which has been interesting. So thanks so much for being on. Thanks so much for sharing, Vico, and good luck with everything.
Thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciate it.